Hello and welcome back to the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology podcast. We call it Spotlights because every time we have an interview, we put the spotlight on somebody else who's doing work in the field of religion and ecology or near the field of religion and ecology. But this week in particular, we're talking about something very central to what this field is about, and that's the American Academy of Religion annual meeting, of which there is a special unit just for religion ecology. And one of the co-chairs for that unit is Kim Carfore, who I welcome back after several years of doing this. It's kind of become a tradition. So welcome back, Kim Carfore, to give us the AAR review.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like it's our post-Thanksgiving, pre-Christmas tradition. And I do want to give a shout out to my crew, my co-chair, Joe Wiebe, and Christiana Zenner, who's on the steering committee. We're kind of like a band, and we were supposed to do this together, but because we all are scholars and we're busy and we have families, it's really hard to get schedules to align, especially with such a short window. But I am looking forward to, and you, the listeners, should be looking forward to this as well. Uh, we've agreed, Sam, you've agreed to do a year in review of the field of religion and ecology, and there will be lots of playful banter and tidbits from the news, scholarship books. I'm promoting your upcoming, not AAR, because that's this one, but the Religion and Ecology Year in Review. With a couple of great scholars. So, anyways, we're not doing that today. Today, we're going to do the Religion and Ecology Unit review for the American Academy of Religion Conference. And so, I just want to give a shout out to the unit in general because I learned in preparation for this meeting that our unit is one of the biggest units in the American Academy of Religion. And so as of now, there are over 100 units, and I think it was like 116, 112, something like that. And they're divided by tiers. And so tier one are the smallest, and tier five is the largest. We were a tier five up until last year. We got kicked down to a tier four, but that's only because they're trying all of the units are kind of crowding out availability. And so we're going to apply to become a tier five again. So this is all just to say it's a very popular unit. It's very big. It's very important. We had our business meeting on Tuesday, and we had scholars from all different fields of study. There was the Gender Caucus, a member from there representing, saying that they wanted to work with us next year. We had a woman from the Afrofutures and Black Theology units, and they were wanting to work together next year. So this year, the topic of the conference was freedom. Next year is futures, plural. So you can imagine why
Mm.
futures would be all of these different identities and visions and imaginaries that want to envision and work together on thinking, okay, what does an ecological future look like? Well, we're going to have to unpack it and include all of these different perspectives. And so I don't want to get too much into the business meeting, but that was just kind of this broad general overview of number one, we're really big. Number two, we're really fun. Number three, we're really relevant. And so it's been I was going to say joy and a privilege to be the co-chair for the last 5 years. It has been difficult because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to rate these papers. It's a lot of work to do the kind of political labor of steering the unit in the direction that is just and is what young scholars are calling for.
Mm.
And in a sense, it's developing this kind of tension of who it was and what it was in the past and where it's going in the future. And so that kind of politically was something to juggle this year, which we can touch on at some point in the podcast if you're interested. But it is. It's a fun process, and I had a lot of fun this year because of the relationships that I'm really building. A lot of people say, I come to the AAR because I want to see. Some people say my chosen family. They say just people that get me. And so I think for a long time, like I was going to this going for about 13 years now, And when you're a young scholar, you're just kind of like wandering around, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what units to go to. I don't know what topics I'm interested in. I'm really intimidated because everyone seems smarter than me. That was me. Maybe some people are like, no, I belong here. But it takes a while to kind of find your flow. And so I definitely feel like I have found my flow this year. So, but I kind of want to get into the panels, the topics. I don't know, where do you want to go with this? What interested you in that broad umbrella that I just opened up? Okay.
Well, that was a really good intro into the abundance and diversity that goes into the religion ecology unit. And I also want to say, for folks who haven't been keeping up with the podcast, Kim and I have recently moved to a farm. And so if you do hear some gunshots in the background, do not be alarmed. That's
Or
because a
frogs.
neighbor or dogs. But I definitely heard gunshots a second ago. And so that's
Oh,
just a neighbor dealing with some pest control. And so it's fine. Everybody's fine. And so not a big deal. Always a fun thing when we invite people out here and they're kind of surprised to hear gunfire. But that's the world we're living in. It's
yeah.
complicated. Pest
We're
control
having a
is
good time.
important. We're having a good time. And but that being said, you laid the kind of set the table for us very well. There's a lot
Good.
going on in the field, and also I appreciate and can't emphasize enough that it is one of the more popular units because it's so relevant, it's so timely, in a you know in a very serious kind of existential threat to the future of life on Earth kind of way. So
Yeah,
I appreciate that a lot of people gravitate toward it because this arguably, not to play favorites, but of course, this is a podcast about religion and ecology, but it might be the most important way in which religious studies is engaging with society right now, is dealing with the ecological crisis. So I appreciate there's so many people, including I know you told me about somebody you interacted with that was like, how do I get into this? I want to
oh,
get on a religion ecology panel. How do I get in? You're trying to be like, hey, can
yeah,
you just like shoehorn me into one of these panels? You're like, sorry, there's a lot of great people doing a lot of great work in this field, and it's
I know.
incredible. And I've been doing work in this field for over 20 years now, and it's amazing how much it has exploded. And so now so many people are
Absolutely.
trying to get in on it.
And it's so diverse, and it's not just how do we make our religions more ecological? How do we green our religions? How do I get my school or church to recycle? It's holy crap, life on Earth is threatened as we know it. How are we thinking survival?
Right.
How, how are we imagining a future that is just and equitable? And so going back to your point about someone who I knew who was like, how can I get in? And I'm thinking, and I told them, I said, we're a meritocracy. And I'm thinking to myself, we had to cut at least 1/6 of our papers, maybe
Right.
1/8 of and these were great scholars. I mean, these are serious, solid papers. And we just didn't have space. And so it was like, that's actually really insulting to think that just because you know the chair that you can get in on this scholarship. It's very competitive at this point.
Hmm.
And we actually are looking through a very particular lens. I think the steering committee is taking very serious this not just an idea, but this material relationship. How do we be anti-colonial?
Hmm.
Is decolonization even a possibility for us or for universities? Um,
Hmm.
Survival. Also, Tara Rowe has been running the energy and extraction
Right.
seminar for a long time. It's 5 years. It's been very successful, and it's coming to a close. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what do we do with that seminar? Do we just translate these methodologies? Do we integrate that into religion ecology? And so this is why I'm saying, okay, we're definitely going to apply to be a tier 5 because we're going to now start integrating some of those the outcomes of that seminar, which was very successful. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people use this terminology of extractive, right? Extractive zones, extractive scholarship, extractive knowledge, extractive relationships, extractive economies. But it's really caught on, and so kind of becoming this new house for that kind of scholarship as well.
Right. So the extractivism seminar, which I'm very familiar with, that was not part of the religion ecology unit, but it's a bunch of people who are very closely affiliated with it. Is that right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Tara Rowe is spearheading it, and I
Friend of
apologize
the
to
pod, have to say. She's been
friend
on
of
the
the
pod.
pod,
Yeah,
yeah,
friend of the
steering
pod.
committee of the Religion Ecology Unit.
Yeah.
And Christiana Zenner, who is also a member of the steering committee, is also working with that group. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I apologize that I don't have all the names available at hand because unfortunately I haven't been
Right.
able to go to many of those talks because they often get scheduled the same time as the religion ecology unit. And this is also something a problem that we've run into is because we've gotten so big, we have a lot of panels. And
Right.
then for some reason, they end up competing with our sibling units, which have become their energy and extractive seminar,
Hmm.
the Indigenous religious traditions unit, the animals and religion unit, and the Native traditions in the Americas unit. And
Right.
so it's just, it's quite impossible to attend all of the discourse that's around religion and ecology. Um, but I guess that's a good thing that there's that much scholarship out there.
Yeah, especially seminars are different than normal panels because they are these like multi-year things. So it's yeah, that's very heartening.
Yeah,
Especially as I think a lot of people are still under the illusion that we have a fossil fuel-based society, and if we just pull the fossil fuels out and slip solar and wind underneath it, we can keep living as we're living. And the extractivism people are saying no, because if you have an extractivist paradigm, you can ruin the world even with solar and wind because you're just extracting metals from the earth. You're hurting local
right.
communities. You're hurting, which are often also indigenous communities, and it's all fueling capital accumulation. So no, we can't just pull
Yep.
out fossil fuel and slip in renewables. We need to rethink our basic values of how to live on Earth, which I know is partly why you and I are living on a farm right now,
Yep.
is to try and live these values of not succumbing to the demands of a high energy society. So yeah, really appreciate what they're doing. I mean, other folks. I mean, Evan Barry's part of that. David Haberman's part of that. Yeah, a lot of folks doing amazing work with extractivism. So I appreciate you mentioning them
Mm.
quite a bit because it's extremely important work, and I feel like a lot of environmentalists and climate activists, environmental justice advocates, they're still not aware of this. People are just like solar now, like yeah, that's good, but what if we have to get past extractivism? And that's a totally different game. So yeah, really appreciate
It's a
that
very
mention.
different thing.
Well,
Yeah.
that being
Yeah.
said, what in the religion and ecology unit were some of your favorite panels? And again, we hate to play favorites, but we can't talk about everybody. I appreciate you mentioning you literally cannot physically go to all these panels. There's too many panels, including
No.
concurrent sessions, and
Yeah.
you can't, unless you're some kind of quantum of energy, you can't locate in two places at the same time. And so
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
impossible to go to everything. But I wonder what are some of the highlights? I know in particular you mentioned Indigenous and Native American studies, and so I know those were some great panels. So what were some of the highlights for you?
Some great highlights, but before I get into that, I do want to go back to what you said that we have made this decision to move to a farm to align more with our values. And that comes with real consequences. And one of those is so funny as you were speaking this, then your internet got kind of glitchy. So just
Oh.
speaking to the audience that, hey, it's part of, trying to align with this degrowth society that we have become accustomed to these extractive industries, extractive economies, right? And so we can't just take for granted fast internet. And what does that look like? Okay, well, maybe podcasts might not be as
Yeah.
streamlined
Well, and
as
I gotta
we
say, don't worry, everybody. We got some good internet showing up soon. We're working on it. And so, as of a couple days from now, we're gonna have a lot better connectivity. So it will be a little more solid, going forward. So yeah, I appreciate that. All right. I heard your previous thing about how you couldn't hear my previous thing. So just letting people know, our internet is a mess right now. We are getting better internet soon. So don't worry. We'll be back with good content for you soon. In the meantime, send donations. Uh, because, we're a couple part-time professors just trying to make ends meet. It's not easy.
the
And
podcast
so,
must live on.
yeah, the podcast has to go on. The show must go on.
And the show
And
must go on with internet.
yeah, even with bad internet. But the moral of the story is we're trying to understand the problem of extractivism, that the problem of our society is not just fossil fuels versus renewables. The problem is high energy lifestyles versus humility,
Mm.
moderation, simplicity, all the virtues we learn from people like Aristotle or Confucius or Henry David Thoreau or Zhuangzi or Gandhi. So many people are telling us live the simple life. And we're like, cool, anyway, I'm going to get on a private jet and go live the simple life. Or even a commercial airliner. Is that really much better? Settle down, everybody. Let's learn to live a little bit more humbly, a little bit more simply. Uh, like the old virtue ethicists of the past would be horrified at the way we're all living our lives right now. So again, big shout out to the extractivism panel. It's like you said, a 5-year seminar. There's going to be a book coming out of that. Amazing work. Some of my favorite people in there: Tara Rowe, David Haberman, Evan Barry, Christy Zenner. Amazing people. That being said, what are some of your other favorite panels from
Or-
the conference? And of course, you can't mention them all. It's okay.
Yeah.
But what are some of the favorites that you found?
Okay. So I think this actually piggybacks really well with our connection to simple lifestyles and degrowth and humility. So Dr. Sarah Nahar, who took my job at U of M. No, I'm just kidding. But I did
University of
apply.
Michigan had a job opening for an environmental justice position recently. You applied for that and got a wonderful interview. So did Sarah Nahar, and she ended up getting the job. Just to give background for the people who don't know that story.
Yes. And I'm so glad she got it because number one, she has two PhDs, so who can compete with that? But number two, she's doing really great research. And by really great research, I mean this girl is hilarious. She is doing research on, can I swear, the podcast?
Yeah, of course.
She calls herself the shit scholar because she's talking about how this porcelain toilet and pooping in flushable water is actually a very American thing. And a lot of people who come into this country, it's this initiatory experience where you're like, I am not used to sitting on a toilet. I'm used to squatting, whether that's in a hole or in if I when I went to India, I haven't traveled much, but I did go to India, my spiritual pilgrimage in my 20s. Um, but you sit down, the porcelain is just where you put your feet, and then you end up squatting. And she said that people that come into America, they end up losing their squatting muscles. And so it's this kind of very formative experience.
I think it was you were resonating with it with your own personal experience because you have traveled to India. And it's something also, friends of the podcast might be familiar with the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek. He talks a lot about how much American ideology can be found in our toilets. Because not only is it flushable water, as you said, it's potable water. It's not just flushable water like gray water. It's potable water that we use in our toilets. This is drinking water that we put in our
Yeah,
toilets. That is absolutely
yeah,
insane according to any other culture
yeah.
aside from contemporary American culture. So yeah, absolutely appreciate that. And I'm definitely going to invite her on the podcast because dealing with water issues is something we've addressed before in the podcast. And gray water, black water, potable water, we need to think through these things more. So really appreciate that there's a scholar out there dealing with that and including the religious perspective on that.
And I also really like the religious perspective and the psychological perspective that she refers to. All right, so I really like Sarah Nahar's religious and psychological addition to looking at our relationship to excrement and this idea that we have to look at our our crap, right? Psychologically. But like you said, you're going to have her on the podcast later, so I'm not going to dive into her work. But I will move into another panel that she was on, which I was on the panel as well. This one was quite a powerhouse. So if you're not familiar with the work of Phil Arnold and Sandy Bigtree, so Phil Arnold just published a book called The Urgency of Indigenous Values, and he works alongside Sandy Bigtree, who is a Mohawk woman, and they are really active in the Onondaga Nation of the Haudenosaunee over in Syracuse, New York. And so this panel was co-organized by me and Phil and Sandy, and it was called The Doctrine of Christian Discovery and Ecological Devastation. And so the work of Phil and Sandy looks at how a series of 15th century papal bulls, so these documents that were published by the Catholic Church in the 1400s, how they are still affecting Indigenous people today. And so way back when, these were documents that said, you know, subdue the heathens and the Saracens and take their land. And so this got indoctrinated into American law. And so it's this American law that has kicked Indigenous people out of their lands and is saying that it's connected to this theological concept. And so right now we're connecting that work to environmental degradation and devastation. And so it was Phil and Sandy spoke, and then Karenna Gore, so Al Gore's daughter, was on the panel. And it was just so surreal to sit next to her as she was presenting. And she was talking about these truths that we need to pay attention to. And Phil and Sandy were unpacking these uncomfortable truths. And I'm sitting there looking at her being like, your dad wrote The Inconvenient Truth way back when. And back then it was inconvenient and now it's urgent, right? So, Phil, the urgency of Indigenous values, the urgency of this moment. And so I think this just speaks to the tone of the AAR this year, especially in the religion ecology unit. I just felt like there was this urgency, this gloves off kind of um,
Mm.
tone that was happening, especially with the younger scholars that are coming up, because we don't have time. And so we'll talk about another panel, Building a Moral Economy, in a little bit, because I kind of want to maintain focus on the Doctrine of Discovery panel. But I can't remember who it was in the Building a Moral Economy panel. But they said we can't just keep doing theory because it feels good. We can't just keep thinking
Well, I think that was
because
Tara Rowe.
tarot, that sounds about right. I'm
Yep.
glad that you remembered that I
Can't
told
just
you
do
that
theory for the sake of theory.
for the sake of theory,
Yeah,
that we
which
have to be,
obviously is a big problem among academics.
yes,
Ivory
yes,
tower kind of thinking. Even the
exactly.
people who say we shouldn't do ivory tower thinking are often not involved in grassroots activism, subsistence practices. They might have a garden in their backyard, but they're
Right.
not out there really working on, putting the shoulder to the wheel of social change.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable because, and especially with the work of Phil and Sandy, it forces you to really think about religion, especially Christianity, as an evil force, right? Because Christianity masquerades as purely good, but it has done a lot of evil that it's not willing to look at in the past, whether that's the boarding schools
Right.
or what we were talking about in this panel, the doctrine of discovery. And so that's what we're pushing back on a little bit. And I think it's uncomfortable for scholars who want to see just the purity in religion, but it's actually been used in religious wars, genocide, environmental degradation. So just kind of shining light on these uncomfortable truths. Um, And so, yeah, Corinna Gorse in this panel talked about, she said structural evil masquerading as good. And so that's what we were
Mm.
unpacking is the structural evil that has been um, what I call ideological scaffolding, right? That there's this monotheistic male God that exists over and above the natural world, and then manifest destiny, and then that justified the domination of humans over nature and the taking of Native American lands and how that was implemented into law. And so, because Native Americans haven't been able to um, tend to their lands, that now we have environmental degradation. And so we're dealing with that. And so I was really proud, if I can be honest, I was really proud of my performance there. And I think that just being on a panel with so many powerhouses, it, I felt like I went into another world. And so if anybody's interested in unpacking or listening to this panel, it got recorded. And so Phil and Sandy are uh, friends of the Forum on Religion and Ecology at Yale, right? They're part of the advisory group.
Yeah, they're both members of the advisory group, and I should also add friends of the pod. Sandy has been on the pod. I should say Sandra Bigtree. We want to use proper full names.
I know.
And Philip Arnold has also had an episode on the podcast. So yeah, both big collaborators with the Forum on Religion Ecology in general, and with the podcast in particular. So are they recorded it and they're going to put it up on their podcast?
Yes. So their podcast is called Mapping the Doctrine of Discovery. And so they were able to do that because of a grant from, I believe it was the AAR. That doesn't matter. But it's just interesting that these kind of intersecting relationships
Well,
and
good.
institutional
And
affiliations.
yeah, and I appreciate the shout out because anybody who likes what we're doing on this podcast at all should definitely check out what they're doing with mapping the doctrines of discovery because it
Yeah.
is a fantastic podcast. And I appreciate that the AAR is giving some grants out to podcasts because I'm sure 10 years ago that was unthinkable. But podcasts as a medium for really genuine communication, that's really changed in the last 10 years.
Yep.
So glad to know that the AAR is paying attention to that and giving money where money is due.
Yeah, so moment of self-promotion. I got a grant last year from the AAR because they were interested in bridging the public-private divide in the study of in religious studies scholarship. And so I have been a big advocate and scholar of ecofeminism and ecofeminist theology. And so advocating how, okay, it's great. So ecofeminism is giving us the analytical tools to kind of deconstructing this colonial mentality, colonial worldview, colonial economy. But what good is it if it stays in the ivory tower? And so ecofeminist theologians likewise are deconstructing these kind of male monotheistic God interpretations of Christianity. They're also becoming more ecological. Sally McFaig's The Body of God. Heather Eaton has a great book on introducing ecofeminist theologies. There's a ton out there, but trying to translate that to the public. And we live in a moment where I'm sorry to say, a couple of weeks ago, I got my students to admit that they don't read. They're undergrads and they just don't read anymore. And so trying to get the information out there, I don't know. I don't want to get into the problems of literacy in our current moment, but I think that podcasts are a really helpful way to translate some of these ivory tower messages.
Yeah, right. Podcasts, social media. Yeah, it's we're going through a very big media change, not unlike the one we went through around 5 to 10,000 years ago with a shift toward literacy from orality.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a big time, and you can fight it as much as you want, but also it's important to recognize that there's ways to go with it and encourage people to expose themselves to new media.
yeah,
So whether it's social media, YouTube, whatever, podcasts. So yeah, there's new ways to talk to people. So that's important, and I appreciate. I didn't know this, I know about Phil and Sandy's podcast, Mapping the Doctrines of Discovery. I did not know that it was part of the AAR grant. So good to know the AAR is supporting them.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Well, that's okay too. But the important thing is giving a shout out to a really gay. I mean, it's an amazing podcast. They've got a lot of good episodes, and of course, both of them have been on this podcast. So that's the important thing is giving them the shout out.
Awesome.
So yeah, that sounds like it
So
was a really productive panel.
it was an incredibly productive panel. And it's one of those panels where, I mean, I responded. Usually, when a respondent on a panel is asked to respond, they get all of the papers ahead of time. You write a preconceived response and then you read your paper. But
Right.
uh, I, Phil and Sandy sent me their slides, and then Sarah sent me hers that she changed a little bit. But I basically just on the spot connected it. And I think that it actually opened the conversation up to make it more productive because it was one of the few panels I've ever seen where we were thinking together and trying to generate new knowledge and generate ideas and generate a cohesive narrative. And so, one outcome and one example of that is Phil and Sandy talk about mapping doctrine of discovery and connecting that to environmental devastation. And then I gave my ecofeminist response. And then Sarah Nahar got back up and said, well, why don't we include the Malleus Maleficarum? And so that was not a papal bull, but that was a document written by, what was it, that German monk, Heinrich Kramer. And, but that was inspired by the Sumerius Deserantes, which was a papal bull written around the same time. And so she says, why don't we map it back to that papal bull? Because connecting this kind of ecofeminist notion that, well, if it's the same underlying logic that humans have used to um, justify the destruction of the earth that men have used to justify the domination of women, can't we trace the doctrine of discovery back to this papal bull that justified the witch burnings? Because
Right.
to me, it was that spiritual connection of women to the earth, and especially Indigenous women to the earth, right? Indigenous women, it's a matriarch, right? Matriarchy, which is very different than a hierarchical way of organizing systems and structures of
Right. Or
domination,
maybe
economies, government.
matrifocal, matrilineal, because
Matrifocal.
matriarchy
Yeah,
obviously is another hierarchy. So yeah, I always appreciate the way
right.
that
Thank you.
feminists kind of deal with the terminology there because it's not easy. Because it's not a kind of uncritical reversal of patriarchy to matriarchy. But yeah, I really
Right.
appreciate Sarah Nahar bringing that up because if you want to talk about this stuff, the witches are part of it.
And that's my where my line of research is gearing towards, and I've been digging up a lot of that, the connection of witch burnings and when you disconnect women from the earth, women from their bodies, or there were powerful women who had land, and when they were widowed,
Right,
then this was the way for patriarchy or those in power, male and men in power, to take their land. It was a land grab.
right.
And so, kind of digging into that, I was really fascinated and happy to hear the concept of the witch burnings getting brought up in three panels or
Hmm.
three papers in three different panels. And so, I'm definitely following my intuitive research, which even just last year, I thought, oh, it's crazy that I'm thinking about witches. How is this relevant to our current moment? But
Right,
and this is why, we keep going back to the AR is finding support, theoretical support, emotional support, institutional support at the AAR. And so yeah, so going back into maybe I'll move a little bit. So we'll shift gears from the doctrine of discovery panel to the panel on building a moral economy. And
ah,
so
wonderful.
this was a powerhouse group of people. And so Building a Moral Economy is a book that is being published. It's already out. And if you're interested, you can go to buildingamoraleconomy.org. And there's resources, there's pedagogical resources. You can go get the book there. But it was the people on the panel. It was Melanie Harris, so an eco-womanist scholar who also did um, a pre-conference event with Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm. And so she just published her book, Black Earth. I can't remember the other part of the book, but integrating poetry and it was a new and eco-womanist theology. It was
Mm.
a really I really like seeing Melanie in this light. I feel like she's becoming more poetic and ministerial.
Mm.
It's quite beautiful to watch. So back to this building moral economy panel. So it was Melanie Harris, Christiana Zenner presided, Abby Mopat, uh, and she presented alongside Reverend Michael, um, what was his name? Reverend Michael, I'll just call him Reverend Michael, but he's in the book as well. They have a cool dialogue
Right, look
in
at
that
the
chapter.
book, everybody. Get all the references from the book. Yeah.
Tara Rowe and then Kwok Poilan. Oh, and
Oh,
Cynthia
yeah.
Molubida.
Also appreciate, I didn't know that Kwok Puilan, I'm a big fan of Kwok Puilan for a long time, years and years and years. But she also has a podcast called Kwok and Roll.
Yes, rock and roll.
Yeah. So yeah, she's
Yeah,
great. I
so
mean,
she's
yeah,
getting
everybody
podcast
on
trained.
that panel, those are all amazing people. So yeah, you can tell it's an
Yeah.
important um publication and idea based upon the fact that everybody commenting was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And just speaking truths, uncomfortable truths. And that's what we need to be doing right now. There's no time for anything else, I think. Obviously, we need discourse and imaginaries towards hope, but we can't have hope papering over truth,
Hmm.
especially because a lot of us scholars who are in the institution or have a privilege to learn aren't the ones that are going to be most affected by climate change or currently are most affected by climate change.
Right. Important
And
point.
so I think that's partly what Reverend Michael was there to do is talking about how we have to think anti-racism as implicit aligned with environmentalism or religion and ecology. And they were talking about this idea of freedom, right? Because the American Academy of Religion this year, the topic for all units was freedom, and so we're conceptualizing ideas of freedom. And so their main point was the freedom for establishing a moral economy, that we
Mm.
don't have to settle for an extractive economy, that
Hmm.
we can build a moral economy, but we have to be loud and we have to be fierce and it has to be anti-racist, it has to be egalitarian. And so it was cool. Christiana Zenner was presiding, and at the end, she says, "This is the honor of my life to preside here." And I thought, I can feel that because these scholars, I've read them at different times in my life, but then to see them all reflecting on this one issue and speaking to this one issue is was really powerful.
Hmm.
So, what else?
I know, right? There's so much else. One of the things I always appreciate about these AAR reviews is that you're trying to summarize something that's basically like thousands and thousands of religious studies scholars or
So
people
many.
adjacent to religious studies. I know even our friend, Jeff Ashton, who's technically a philosophy professor, but he does Asian philosophy, he showed up. And so you have people from philosophy and literature and social sciences, environmental studies, religious studies, politics, history.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. For anybody who's listening to this who hasn't been to the AAR, you got to go to see the abundance and diversity of perspectives. And for folks who have been, you might not know what you actually saw. You might have been cloistered away in your own little group. You know, sometimes people are like, I just
Yeah.
do contemplative studies, and nothing against those people. Don't mean to throw them out of the bus. But it's easy to stay within your own group and not realize, oh, this is such a convergence of so many amazing people with amazing perspectives who are really trying to put their foot on the gas of getting these perspectives out into the world. Or maybe for
Yeah.
that matter, you might recall, Karl Marx said that the locomotive is kind of the revolution of history. And it was Walter Benjamin who was like, no, 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 it's the emergency brake. We need to pull the brake
Mm.
on this stuff, pull the brake on progress, growth, development. So, it's a mixed bag. Some people are there to put their foot on the gas, some people are there pulling the brake, but it is a lot of people who are trying to
Yeah.
facilitate social change with religious studies as much as possible. So that being
Yeah.
said, knowing you can't possibly be exhaustive about all this, even about the religion ecology unit in particular, what's one other panel that you want to talk about?
Well, before I get into that, I remembered his name, Reverend Michael Malcolm. Just need to name his
Michael
name.
Malcolm. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It is
Okay.
really hard to remember everybody's name. Again, there's thousands of people at these things.
Oh yeah, I think 8,000, 8 to
Yeah,
10,000 a
that's
year
what I was thinking. I was
scholars.
thinking it approaches 10,000. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
So yeah, a decent size. Well, I guess that would be considered a smallish city. But anyways,
Well,
so
we
the
live in a
next
city of
panel,
about 200 people, to be fair.
200. Yeah, that's why I just plot words.
So yeah, 10,000. And we moved from a city that was about 10,000 of a population. It's funny because we both are professors at the University of San Francisco, where the population is around 800,000. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's a funny thing to comment on. How many people is 10,000 people? It's different depending upon your background and your
it's all
perspective.
so
It's
relative,
so
and
relative.
also population density. How big
That's
is the
true.
city? How spread
Yeah.
out can they be?
Yeah.
So, okay, so another panel that stood out to me. So there's two. One was Yuria Salidwin. She just published a book called Flourishing Kin. And I know she's been on the podcast, but this was
Yes.
her author meets critic book. That one stood out to me. Number one, because I was on the panel, but number two, because I've never actually been in a room where at the AAR where there was a standing ovation at the end. And so that really stood out. And once again, it just speaks to our current moment because she was criticizing how contemplative studies has been, it's very Western, it's very individualistic. And her as indigenous woman and an indigenous studies scholar, still dedicated to the field of contemplative studies, is trying to bridge this indigenous approach with a Western model. And so really thinking about, and I named it in the panel, I said what the Western contemplation tends towards, and this might be harsh to some people, but spiritual narcissism, where you're just trying to save your soul, your individual soul, right? Or it's through Christian narrative, you're trying to get to heaven. But
Mm.
from an indigenous approach, you're trying to deepen one's connection with the earth and with people and with community. And it's not this romantic idealization that we're all one, it's attending to the stickiness of our interconnection.
Mm.
And it's so she's a path breaker, you know. She's a warrior. I called her a warrior because she spoke on the panel about all this discrimination that she's experienced. And I hope she'd be okay with me revealing this. I think she's spoken in public about it before, uh, but just continuing to be a visionary for Western Europeans and trying to bring this indigenous knowledge as a salve, as healing the wounds of the Western world.
Mhm.
And so I think just really feeling, oh, here's this gift to how do we face our uncertain future? Well, here's some meditations, here's some a framework that is relevant. And so yeah, at the end, everyone stood up. There were a few tears that were shed as well, which doesn't really happen in academia in a way that's accepted. You know, usually if you do end up crying, you hide your tears or you feel weak, but um, it was not encouraged, but it was welcome.
Mm.
So that was one panel that stood out to me. And then another panel was, it was so funny. We held our business meeting. Well, we didn't hold it. We held it because it was scheduled then. We didn't choose this, but our business meeting was scheduled on Tuesday. And as you know, most people don't stay at the AR until Tuesday. Most people fly out Monday night or something because it's a long
Right.
time to be
The
away from
conference,
family.
yeah,
It's a long,
the main events are like Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
there's some pre-conference events on Friday. There's some late panels on Tuesday. So yeah, a lot of people, including myself in many years past, are gone
Yeah.
by Tuesday morning.
By Tuesday. Yeah, I
Yep.
definitely left Monday last year.
Yeah.
Um, but we sat there in this room Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. and looked around and we were like, wow, there are 40 people in this room on a Tuesday morning. And one of the panelists, I believe his name was Mark. Um, I wish I remembered his last name because I would call him Dr. Mark. He he's a fantastic scholar activist who's studying sacred activism in communities that are
Hmm.
doing the work of religion ecology through an activist and ritualistic lens. At the beginning of his panel, he said, congratulations to us that are here on a Tuesday, and congratulations to me because I've never been at the AAR on a Tuesday. And I can't remember how many years he says he's been going, but it was a lot. And so it was just this really affable tone, but also extremely serious. And, he shared some personal information about what brought him to this work, and it was really heavy and reminded us how serious this is. And one of the scholars talked about she's doing work on women who are navigating the question of having a child in light of climate change. And so that was also heavy in a different way. And I think that, and they were all young, they were all young scholars
Hmm.
and just so sharp, so smart, and so grounded in their perspectives and institutions and research. And it actually gave me hope. And I don't like that word. It gave me, it was refreshing to see these new perspectives being brought into dialogue with religion and ecology because it's, I mean, it's life or death, right? And so talking about the reality of women choosing to have a child or not based upon climate change, it's important to get that research out there, right? Like Trump just recently passed, I think he either passed or he was about to pass. All I know is that in the news he called him the father of IVF. And I was like, because he's wanting more women to have children.
Mhm.
And it frustrated me because he's not looking at the context, right? With these questions of bringing a child into this world when climate change is real, when inflation is real, when the economy is unstable, you can't just give people IVF and act like everything's okay, right? We have to address the context, right? The ecological context, the economic context. And so I think just kind of going back to this panel about the research on women choosing whether or not to have a child in light of climate change, I think is just such a gift to the field because
Hmm.
I think when you talk to, at least for me, when I talk to people about my work in the field, they immediately think, going back to how I started this podcast, oh, okay, so you're going to try to get all universities to recycle. No, it's deeper than that, and this is why we study religion and theology and ecology. It's questions of survival, life or death, what happens after death, what are the theological concepts that have driven ecological devastation. And these are just how we developed extractivism and how to derail them, how or what does the future look like? So
Right.
that's that's how we ended the conference. And then there was a lot of excitement for what to do next year. And I think that we're planning on, we've never, at least since I've been involved in religion and ecology, we haven't done a pre-conference event where we're doing something off campus. And so
Hmm.
if all things go well next year, we're going to try to do a, and this is along the kind of apocalyptic lines and survivalism, a hike with outdoors in some local wilderness area while we're unpacking or reading. I'm not really sure which one we'll decide on. Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. And so really digesting this idea of future and survivalism. So
Right. I appreciate that. That was a really nice segue because I believe the theme for next year's AAR is futures or the future.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Uh,
future. And so they're thinking broadly, the future of academia, the future of life on Earth, the future of our planet. And that's why it was, I don't know, the emotional tone was I felt like a lot of scholars from other fields like flocked to the room. I don't know, that's all I could describe it. It was a flocky experience because when we started the business meeting, I basically had to kick out the panel of really great scholars doing activism, and they were just kind of chatting with one another. And I was like, order in the court, you guys go out because these people are being loud and I need to write down notes. And so this energy around, all right, let's ask tough questions. And that's really what the people in the room were about was we want a
mhm.
safe space with experts and intelligent people to ask tough questions because that's the where we're arriving at is okay, well, what is survival in the future? Is it, this group survives in light of this group? We had, like I mentioned earlier in this episode, one of the members of the Tran caucus, and he volunteered, hey, if you want to co-sponsor a panel with the caucus, which actually, as I'm speaking out loud, I don't think we can co-sponsor with a caucus. I think it
I
might be
appreciate
a
you thinking
unit.
out loud about the panels for next year.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I really liked what they offered. They said,
yeah, of course.
as someone who has transitioned, I'd like to offer the concept of transitioning. What does it mean to transition to a future? Whether that's thinking
Right.
economically, thinking um, psychologically, or mentally,
Yeah, right. I mean, I
new
appreciate
forms
it.
of family.
Because you got the Paul Tillich group being like, how does Tillich's theology relate to the future? You got the Friedrich Schleiermacher group being like, how does Schleiermacher relate to the future? The Contemplative Studies group, the Religion Ecology unit, the Animals and Religion unit. And so futures plural really emphasizes what's going to come up next year. And I also
Yeah.
appreciate sometimes people do really great panels that aren't directly related to the theme for the year. That's also a
That
thing.
always happens.
Yeah, the theme for the year isn't that big of a deal. But what I appreciate is that every year the Religion College unit is just getting stronger and stronger and intersects more with people for whom that isn't their home base. So you see people who
Yeah.
are coming from other units who want to do work in that area. So that's very
Yeah, that's
heartening.
true.
Yeah.
And
And
that's what
so,
they said.
yeah.
It was so heartening. They they were like, "Well, I'm here because the future is environmental. It's
Yeah.
thinking ecology. It's thinking my unit and how that connects to ecology."
Yeah. Turns out we do, in fact, need a habitable planet.
Yeah.
And, colonization of Mars notwithstanding, it's not happening tomorrow. It's not happening next month or next year. So in the
Yeah.
meantime, we got to figure out how to live on this Earth together.
Yeah, and that's what
Um,
Corinna Gore spoke to in the Doctrine of Discovery panel. And I always appreciate when someone brings it back to this, which is, we can't go to Mars. This is our home. We have to learn how to live on this home
yeah,
together. And it's going to be sticky. It's going to be uncomfortable. We have to ask tough questions. We have to have difficult conversations. We're going to say things wrong. We're not going to have the right words. We're going to step on each other's toes, but we have to have compassion. And I think that's one of the strengths of the AAR is it's the polis, it's politics, right? Like we walked into the building and there was a metal detector. So no matter how angry you made someone in the audience, there's a sense of safety that a lot of people out in the world don't have right now. And so I think that we have to speak up and we have to speak out and we have to push ourselves. I think we have to push beyond what we thought our limits were because it's just different now. It's just different now. And that's just what I picked up on
yeah.
this year.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. The complexity and chaos of our current moment is only increasing. In the meantime, that doesn't mean we stop doing theoretical work. That means we
No.
learn to do it in a way that engages the social, economic, political, and material conditions of our moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great note to end on, especially because currently we have functional Wi-Fi, so I feel like we should end it while we can still communicate
I love that.
effectively. And so this was great and a good review about what the AAR is about what the Religion Ecology Unit is about more specifically, and a great preview as to how this unit's going to move forward, appealing to other people from other units, also appealing to the very serious demands of our current moment. So Kim Carfor, as always, I appreciate you being on here a whole bunch. And for folks who found this episode a little tumultuous in terms of internet connectivity, don't worry. We'll be back with a little bit more stability for you in the future. In the meantime, check out all the people who were mentioned,
Yeah.
Sandra
Yep.
Bigtree, Philip Arnold, Sarah Nahar, Christy Zenner, Tara Rowe, like amazing people. Obviously, Corinna Gore, also big shout out to her because she's one of those people who is on my list of people to invite onto the podcast. So this will be a good excuse to do it. So, and she's the director for the Center for Earth Ethics, which you should check
Yes.
out independently. It's an amazing center. And we have had other Center for Earth Ethics people on the podcast previously.
Great.
So yeah, lots of great stuff there. So hopefully this was something where there was a lot of information that you can kind of use to guide you into even more exciting research and theory and writings. But in general, always appreciate these year in reviews. And we'll have a bigger, like full year in review, not just the AAR in review, but we'll have a year in review episode coming out for you late in December. And that'll be a fun way to wrap up the year. Because what a crazy year it's been. Just when you think 2024 was crazy enough, 2025 even crazier. And if you like craziness, wait till you get to 2026. It's gonna be
Yes.
nuts. Uh,
Yep. We're gonna have to learn how to laugh just to stay sane. So,
maybe. All right. Well, I like to end the episode where I let the guest give us one word or one phrase, or maybe a sentence, because academics are terrible about brevity. But if you could give us one word or one phrase to take us out, I'd appreciate it.
I'm grateful for my crew who holds me accountable and empowers me to do the work because it's hard. So if you're out there and you want to do the work, find your crew, find the people who hold you accountable. The sentence is getting really long, but you know who you are.